So let's say you've just got yourself a Ninja 400 and now you want to jump up to a ZX10, baby. What's it going to be like for you jumping from a little bike to a big bike? And what do you need to learn in order to master your new fast motorcycle? Well, that's what we're going to learn in today's video. I've partnered up with my friends over at the Yamaha Champ School, and I'm riding this sweet Triumph Speed Triple 1200RR here on track at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, brought to you by the good folks over at Eurocycle. So I'm having a ton of fun. Be sure to check out the links in the description to all of these companies, Eurocycle and Yamaha Champ School, to make sure you check out all the cool stuff that they're doing. They were nice enough to let me come out here and rip on track, and they gave me this motorcycle to ride as well. Let's get into it today on how to master a fast motorcycle. So I asked my friends here at the Yamaha Champ School, Chris and Eziah. Both of them are professional motorcycle racers with tons of accolades and who've actually gone up through a 125cc race bike all the way to riding super bikes on track. And they've got plenty of experience of what you're gonna need to know from going from a little bike to a big bike. So let's hear what they had to say. Alrighty folks, with me I have Chris Peris, who's gonna be helping us demonstrate the differences between riding a little bike on the street and a big bike on the street. There's some pretty big differences, right?
Yeah, you know, I've gotten the opportunity to ride a lot of these different types of motorcycles, and you know what it really comes down to is the faster the motorcycle, the more everything counts, the more precise you have to be with all of your inputs. Cool.
Yeah, so walk us through, if someone's coming from a small bike to a big bike, what's the first thing they should kind of keep in mind?
You know, I think obviously there's some significant differences in power, you know, and when we start thinking about, you know, initial throttle pickup, this on your Ninja 400 is going to be very different than this on an R1 per se, right? So realizing that, you know, as smooth as we think we always are, putting these minute little inputs in, it really can come on a lot quicker than a lot of people think. You know, we talk a lot about at the school using body, using core to try to get weight out of our hands, because when they're in there, we make these what seem like relatively little movements. They're pretty significant on a big bike.
Cool. So on the street, let's say this is a typical corner someone's going to take. Is there a little bike line on the street that someone should run, or a big bike line?
Yeah.
Does that change?
On the street, we're not really pushing for the limits, you know.
That's
so
the thing,
you know, a lot of it is just, you know, keeping yourself away from traffic, out of the way. But number one place where riders are dying is running wide on corner exits, running off the road into the guardrail, off the cliff, because their bike is actually opening up radius too early in the corner. The faster the bike, the faster the radius opens up, the more it really counts. So when you're riding a really fast bike, I think that the number one thing is you really have to make sure it's pointed. You've got your lane opening, you see that you're heading where you want to go before you really truly start to accelerate. Otherwise you just run out of road, or you know, on a 12-foot wide lane, you run out of lane very, very quickly. On a 40-foot wide racetrack, you know, you can get away with some things, but you know, the street's where it all counts, and this idea of exit direction, the bike has to be pointed before we let it accelerate.
Yeah, so on a big bike, you know, you're saying that this much throttle is going to mean a massive difference in radius, right? Because you're picking up that much more speed. Now, what about the brakes? Obviously, brakes are much more powerful on a big bike, right? So is that something beginners should kind of keep in mind?
Yeah, you know, it's a lot of these initial inputs, you know, they do have some, you know, relatively strong pistons, calipers, all that stuff. So, you know, it does also have more weight. So, you know, it will be, as much as there are some differences that are going to be involved in it, you know, it's a lot of the same application. I find that the braking from a small bike to a big bike is probably, you know, less of a noticeable deal than it is on the throttle side.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to touch on too is maybe the initial braking feel is about the same and the kind of power that produces, but I know that because you get a lot more speed out of the bike, your braking distance has to increase, right?
Yeah, 100%. So we say, you know, more speed, more brakes. The faster the bike, the earlier everything needs to happen. So, you know, it's just getting that mindset of, you know, we always talk about going to the brakes when we're nervous. We'll be a little bit nervous earlier as we start to ride a faster motorcycle. So just keeping that idea as, you know, stopping distance, or obviously going to be longer on a faster, heavier bike. Takes a little bit longer to stop it. So, really just getting eyes moving, being a little bit ahead of the game to, be ahead of whatever might be coming, and just getting that idea going.
Yeah. So Chris, last point I wanted to ask you was you actually have experience racing little bikes all the way down to 125s and a lot of experience racing big bikes. So what was that like for you going from small bikes to big bikes? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, every time you go up in displacement, there's always, differences, right? And, coming off small stuff, I started when I was relatively young and, didn't have maybe a whole educational background behind it, but you could get away with a lot, right? When we don't have a lot of horsepower, we don't have a lot of stopping power, we can get away with more things. Every time you move up to a faster bike, it was like, wow, this is more difficult. I know the first year I went to ride a 1000, I was actually, quicker on my 600 for the first couple months of all the tracks that we had went to.
Wow.
Because all these little things that we talked and worked so much at, it was just exponentially more important. You ran out of track faster. The bike had to get pointed this much better. Otherwise, you're always rolling out of the throttle and not doing what, these big fast motorcycles are designed to do, which is spend time getting back to wide open throttle and maximizing, everything we can on a racetrack.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much. I think we're going to hear from Eziah next, so I appreciate it.
Right on.
All righty. How's it going?
Good, man.
Good to see you. So we're talking beginners going from little bikes to big bikes. What, in your opinion, do they need to know?
Yeah, we really harp on more speed, more brakes, but it's kind of just realizing the faster the bike, the more precise we have to be, right? It's kind of realizing that, the mistakes have to be minimized. On a bigger bike, we can get away with, more mistakes. On a little bike, they're more forgiving. But yeah, the biggest thing is to really be present and in the moment of where you're at and what you're doing, right? It's getting on a big bike. We know that we need more time, more distance to slow down, so.
Well, but my buddy on the street said that I just need to jump on a leader bike and just send it. That's what I've been told. I just need to get on there and just whack it wide open. I mean, come on, I'm not a pussy. Yeah, that's what I do, right?
I know, right? It's like there's fun in sending it, but the thing of coming from road racing and sending it without a plan kind of hurts, so really figuring out the way to truly send it is kind of the process behind it, finding maximizing getting the bike to wide open throttle and not hurting our exits, and on the street we won't really prioritize that stuff, but there is a certain kind of aggression that comes into racing that you really want to send it, but all our initial things have to be smooth. These things will take tremendous loads but not abrupt loads, and truly kind of getting that systematic flow to the riding is the important part where sending it matters, I guess.
So would you say that you approach riding a small bike and a big bike mostly the same because you have this system, or no? We don't really care where we go to the brakes. It's, we carry our brakes till we're happy with speed and direction, and, the racetrack only dictates so much, so it's, you're almost releasing the brakes within the same spot from a small bike to a big bike, but, you may carry the brakes a little longer on a big bike just because of the way it opens up its radius. So the plan and approach to each bike is quite similar. So, there's just some minor differences that we have to know when we get on the bike to change for that ride. Yeah. Would you recommend for beginners to jump on track with a smaller bike or a bigger bike?
Absolutely the smaller bike, right?
You think smaller bike, okay.
Get the process going. Lean angle is a certain part of it to keep certain amount of speed going and trading it off for cornering force, and it's easier to learn that stuff on a smaller bike. And, coming from minis, it just developed that process of fear mitigation, I guess, to be able to lean the bike over when we need it.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me a little bit about your experience. Obviously you've raced small bikes, twins, big bikes. How did that kind of go for you in that progression? Did you feel like when you went from smaller bike up the displacement category, you had to change your mindset a little bit, or how did that go?
Yeah, definitely had to change the mindset. I was always the kid that wanted to send it. No real instruction.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Right, right. Learning who I am. It's but the idea of it was, you truly had to just figure out what each thing needed, and to maximize where you're at, you have to figure out what the best are doing on that kind of machine. So it's one of those things where it did help, but it's also knowing the differences in between, right? It's all motorcycling's the same. It's pretty much driving, it's pretty much like driving our cars and stuff. So, you know, they want to have the same input. So kind of just riding them that way and just maximizing for whatever's at hand.
That's awesome. E, anything else you want to tell the folks about going from a small bike, mastering a big bike? I feel like nobody ever like masters a bike. I mean, Valentino Rossi maybe mastered it, 10 out of 10. So do you feel like it's just a constant learning, adjustment process when it comes to that?
Yeah, and even Rossi will say he continually was learning as the times were changing. So it's mastering something is always difficult, and you know, perfection is hard to find in a sport like this where there can always be a little bit better. But that's what's so rewarding about this sport. It's
100%.
Truly keep finding, you know, in refining the process, and things will come together.
Yeah, awesome, E. Thanks so much, man.
Right on, man.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you learned something about what it's gonna be like to master a fast motorcycle. Remember, those inputs make a big difference. If you're going from riding on the street on a Ninja 400, this amount of throttle might be an extra 10 miles per hour on a Ninja 400, whereas this amount of throttle on an R1 is gonna be an extra 30 miles per hour. Consequently as well, your braking distance is gonna have to change dramatically. If you're slowing down from 80 miles per hour, you gotta start braking way sooner than you would have normally on your Ninja 400. So these are some of the things you need to keep in mind when you're going from a little bike to a big bike. Keep in mind as well that radius equals miles per hour. So the more you crank on that gas on a bigger bike, the faster that radius is gonna increase. So if you crank on the gas, you're gonna end up running wider than you normally would have on your Ninja 400 because it's just got way more acceleration underneath that motorcycle. So keep all this in mind and be sure to watch this video back and really listen to what these guys said in the interview. They are literal tomes of knowledge when it comes to riding motorcycles effectively, safely, and quicker on track. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Big shout out to Yamaha Champ School for bringing me out here to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and to Eurocycle for giving me this bike for the days that I was here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you in the next one.
Keep watching in